Part 1. Meeting at the bridge. The train raced through fields of golden wheat and lazy waving sunflowers, and Claire couldn't take her eyes off the window. Every turn of the railway revealed views that seemed painted: sparse, solitary trees, wooden houses with darkened roofs, and narrow rivers glistening in the midday sun. The wind that blew through the slightly open window smelled of herbs, hot iron, and something childlike, long forgotten. She was on her way to visit her grandmother in the country for the first time in years, a place that was etched in her memory as a world of sun, the smell of raspberries, and the whisper of evening winds. Every rumble of the train lulled her back to a time when the world seemed vast and summer seemed eternal. As she disembarked at the station, Claire felt the ground beneath her feet feel softer than the asphalt of the city. People were in no hurry here. People were walking slowly with their shopping baskets, tractors were rumbling in the distance, and birds were chirping loudly in the air. She was walking along a familiar path, barely looking at the road, as her feet led her. Part 2. Days full of sun. The next morning, Claire was awakened by sunlight filtering through the thin lace curtains. The sounds of the waking village could be heard through the half-open window: a distant dog barking, the creaking of cart wheels on gravel, the quiet voices of neighbors discussing the weather. There was something about this morning that reminded her of her childhood, when the day seemed longer than a whole week, and the future infinitely bright. She ran out of the house barefoot, enjoying the cool dew on her feet. Liam was already waiting for her on the road, leaning against a wooden fence with his bike, an old canvas backpack dangling from the handlebars. "Ready for an adventure?" he asked with a smile, and the sun immediately shone brighter. Their first route was through the forest, which began just beyond her grandmother's garden. The trees stood there like old giants, remembering all the secrets of childhood, hide and seek, and the first kisses of classmates. The forest air smelled of pine needles and damp earth. Liam led Claire along barely noticeable paths, where the tree trunks intertwined with crowns so thickly that the twilight reigned even at midday. "Listen," Liam stopped and raised his finger. "Do you hear how the mockingbird sings?" Claire closed her eyes and concentrated. In the polyphonic singing of the forest, a high, changeable whistle really stood out. She opened her eyes and saw the delight on Liam's face, and she felt warm from the way he could hear the world. They climbed a fallen oak tree that lay across a small ravine and had an impromptu picnic there. Having taken apples and nuts from Liam's backpack, they shared stories about their lives. "In the city," Claire said, biting into a juicy apple, "everything is different. People are in a hurry, even their smiles seem half fake. Every day is the same there. But here," Liam said, watching the sun play on the leaves, "every day is different, even if you just walk along the same path. Everything is alive here." In the afternoon they went to the old mill. The building stood on its own, covered in ivy, with broken windows and part of the roof collapsed. Claire had always found the place a little scary, but with Liam, fear turned to excitement. They went inside, stepping carefully over the cracked boards. The air inside was cool and musty, but in the rays of light that penetrated through the holes in the roof, specks of dust flickered like tiny stars. "This is where the knights hid when they were protecting their princess," Liam began, climbing up to the second floor and looking back at Claire with a sly smile. "And the witches sat over there," he pointed to the corner where an old collapsed barrel lay, "and brewed their potions. And you would protect me if I were a princess?" Claire teased, climbing up after him. "And don't I protect you now?" he answered seriously, and she felt something flutter in her chest. They returned to the river later, wading through the shallows, careful not to step on the slippery rocks. Liam grabbed her hand when she almost slipped, and their laughter echoed across the still surface of the water. "Will you always be like this, carefree and laughing?" he asked, looking at her with a long gaze that made Claire feel her cheeks warm. "Will you always be like this, seeing beauty in every drop?" She answered the question with a question. In the evening, when the sun began to hide behind the treetops, they returned to the bridge where they had first met. They sat next to each other, their feet in the water, and watched as the ripples from the breeze washed away the reflection of the pink sky. Liam took out his camera and silently took several pictures, Claire in profile, with a thoughtful look, their legs dangling over the water, the reflection of the moon, which was already rising above the forest. Walking home, Claire did not want to let this day go. Each step along the road was filled with sweet fatigue and quiet joy. She knew that this summer would be special, and she could no longer imagine the morning without the sound of pebbles knocking on the window frame. Part 3. Nights Under the Stars. Time passed, and summer slowly passed its middle. The days became a little shorter, the nights thicker, and the air in the evenings cooler. But for Claire and Liam, this only made each evening even more special. After dinner, they met on a quiet path, lit by rare lanterns, and walked together to the lake, slowly, enjoying the moment itself. Their favorite place was the pier on the far shore, which had long been overgrown with reeds and abandoned. The boards there creaked under their feet, and the air smelled of water and old boards. They spread out a blanket, brought a thermos of hot cocoa, which Claire made according to her grandmother's recipe, and sat, hugging each other, looking at the night sky. "Do you remember how when we were kids we were afraid of the forest at night?" Claire asked one day, when the stars were already shining brightly. "Of course. You kept grabbing my hand and saying that you heard a witch in the bushes," Liam laughed, and his laughter rang with a light, warm sadness. "And you assured me that the witch was an old owl who lived in a pine tree behind the mill." Claire smiled and gently nudged him with her shoulder. On such evenings, time seemed to cease to exist. The moon rose above the forest, filling the pier with soft silver. The stars were reflected in the water, and it seemed as if they were sitting in the middle of the universe. Liam stretched his hand to the sky and pointed out the constellations. "There is the swan. See how it spreads its wings. And a little to the left is the lyre. They say Orpheus played melodies on it that could make even stones cry." "You always tell such beautiful stories," Claire whispered, leaning against his shoulder. Sometimes they were just silent, and this silence was cozy. They listened to the fish splashing, the grasshoppers chirping, the owl hooting far away in the forest. Sometimes Liam hummed something barely audible, the words dissolving in the night air, but Claire remembered these melodies better than any words. On one of those nights, they fell asleep right on the dock. Claire woke up in the middle of the night with the moon shining right in her face, and heard Liam softly saying her name in his sleep. Her heart was filled with such warmth that she was afraid to move, lest she ruin this fragile moment. In the daytime after such nights, they met on the old road and walked beyond the village, to the abandoned bell tower. There, on a small platform in front of the entrance, they had breakfast, bread with jam and cheese, apples that they picked from the trees along the way. Liam showed his photos, portraits of Claire, forest landscapes, sunbeams on the water. "You know how to catch moments," Claire said, sorting through the printed photos. "And you make moments happen," he answered, and their gazes met for so long that everything around them disappeared. Sometimes they played at silence. They sat on a bench under the bell tower and tried not to say a word until someone laughed. And each time Claire was the first to break down, because Liam made funny faces at her or winked without looking away. By nightfall, they returned to the pier again. One day, Liam suggested sailing to the middle of the lake on an old boat that they had repaired together. The water was black and smooth, reflecting the stars like a mirror. They lay on the bottom of the boat, holding hands and whispering stories to each other that no one else would ever hear. On nights like these, Claire realized that everything that had once seemed important, grades, fashion, the opinions of friends from the city, lost all meaning here. Only the moon, the stars, and Liam's hand in hers were real and eternal. Part 4. Farewell and Memory. With each morning, summer became more and more of a reminder of its fleetingness. The air became cool, the morning wind brought the smell of wet earth and fallen leaves. It seemed that even the birds began to sing quieter. Claire woke up earlier and earlier, as if trying to stretch out the remaining days with Liam, in which every moment was worth its weight in gold. They still met at dawn, but now they were mostly silent. Sometimes they just sat next to each other on the hill, watching the sun appear from behind the forest, slowly pouring golden light over the treetops. Liam put his arm around Claire's shoulders, and she listened to his breathing, even, warm, so familiar. She tried to remember every detail, the line of his cheekbones, the dimple in his cheek when he smiled, the look in his eyes in the light of the morning sun. In the afternoon, they went to the mill, where they laughed and fooled around together for the first time. But now their laughter was quieter, their gazes longer and sadder. Liam photographed Claire against a grassy wall, and each frame was imbued with an elusive longing for a moment that would never be repeated. "You know," he said one day, putting the camera away, "I wish we could stay here forever. I wish every day could be like these." "And if time really could stop, would you regret it?" she asked, looking into his eyes. "Never," he answered firmly. The evenings were the hardest. They walked along the lakeshore, sometimes holding hands, sometimes walking side by side in silence. The moonlight cast long shadows across the water, turning it into a silver canvas over which the occasional seagull glided. Liam spoke of the cities where he would study, of the dreams he had cherished since childhood, and with every word Claire felt their paths diverge, a wall growing between them that words alone could not break down. One such night, they lit a fire on the beach. The flames swayed in the night air, illuminating their faces with a soft, almost magical light. They sat, hugging, listening to the crackle of the woods and the distant echo of an owl in the forest. Liam began to speak. "You changed me. I never thought I could feel this way, that a person could be my whole world. And you," Claire paused, swallowing back tears, "you showed me what it was like to truly live. Not just breathe, but feel every moment." They talked about everything, about their fears and hopes, about their childhood dreams and about a future that seemed so far away and yet so terrifyingly close. They talked until the sky began to lighten in the east and the forest was painted with the first colors of dawn. The next morning, Claire walked to Liam's house. She walked slowly, as if each step took her strength. His suitcase was at the gate, and Liam's uncle was talking on the phone next to him. It was quiet inside the house, and Claire felt her heart beating so loudly that it seemed like the whole world could hear it. Liam came out onto the porch, and their eyes met. For a few seconds, they just stood there, not saying a word, drinking each other in with their eyes. "Are you ready?" Claire asked, almost whispering. "Is anyone ready to walk away from the most important thing in their life?" He sighed, coming closer. She hugged him tighter than she had ever held him before. They kissed as if they were trying to leave a part of themselves in each other. When they broke apart, Liam placed a flat gray stone in her palm, the same one they had found together that first month of summer. "Hold it," he said. "When the going gets tough, when you feel lonely, just hold it tight. I'll be here for you, even if we're far apart." The car started down the dirt road, kicking up clouds of dust, and Claire stood there until her figure disappeared around the bend. The wind blew through her hair, tears welled up in her eyes, and an ache throbbed in her chest that neither the quiet of the summer morning nor the first words of her grandmother as she came to hug her could ease. The sun rose especially slowly that day, as if the world didn't want to start a new day without Liam. Years later, Claire lived in a big city. Her life included meetings, work, noisy streets, and short evenings at the computer. But every time everything around her began to weigh on her, she took a gray stone out of the drawer of her nightstand, squeezed it in her palm and closed her eyes. And then she returned to where the grass was higher than her head, where the lake reflected the stars, and where a boy with a camera once said, "You laugh with your eyes." And in those moments she knew, summer never ends if you keep it carefully in your heart.